You go through your own mind about your own doom, how you might die.
Actually, virtually died down there a couple of times.
Full on, yeah.
Pearl shell diving was once a very important industry around the north of Australia.
For 100 years it had been dominated by Asians working under master pearlers. Pearl shell diving was extremely dangerous and demanding work that few Europeans were prepared to do. The numbers of divers lost are legendary. The White Australia policy was still alive and well in 1971. Therefore, Asians could only be brought in by contract, indentured labour as it was known. There was keen interest by both government and master pearlers to break what was perceived as the stranglehold the Asians had, principally Japanese, on the fishery. In 1971, champion spear fisherman and abalone diver Dale Chapman was approached by businessmen representing Pearls Proprietary Limited, pearl culture operators, to see if Europeans could do this dangerous work.
And I said, I will be interested. I said, as long as I've got complete control of the employment of the divers and whoever I want to employ and the systems. And they thought about that for a while, and then they got back to me and said, yeah, we're prepared to go along with that.
It so happens that my old friend Andrew Levings was part of that changeover, although he arrived a bit later than Dale. So I was up in Port Douglas and got the chance to interview Dale Chapman about the early days of the modern pearl diving. Mm-hmm. And you were there, you come along in what, 75?
75.
I was there in 73 researching my first book, Australian and New Zealand Sail Traders. Mm-hmm. And the changeover was underway then.
Yes.
From the old hard hat. And it was pretty archaic, wasn't it?
Yes.
It had the open tiller steering with the ropes to steer.
Yeah.
The engineer was up in the middle of the ship with the hatch off the engine room, standing by the engine, ready to take the orders in and out of gear or a few revs or at anything. And I couldn't believe it. It stepped back 50 years, 100 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to stir up the deck crew if you're wearing hard hat, or you might get a bit of chili powder down the down the intake.
They could get their own back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you knew Dale Chapman, but you wouldn't have seen him for 50 years?
Yeah, I didn't know him personally, but he was there. He was in some of the sort of higher ranking organisation at the time that was bringing us into using Hookah rather than hard hat to pick up the pearl shell.
And when I was there, of course, I took a lot of photos around Broome, and the old butcher shop and Streeter and Mails and all that. It's so much changed in the last 50 years with all the tourism.
Oh, it's vast. I think the trigger for that was a chap called Lord McAlpine, who came in and reinvigorated Broome.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll hear more from Andy a bit later. Dale was first sent to Thursday Island.
And what we're going to do, you'll go to Thursday Island. Peter Cummings will up there, they're refitting a lugger called the John Louis up there. The idea will be to take that, to refit it properly, take it round to Broome, sail it from Thursday Island round to Broome, and then try and break the Asian diving systems and go from there if we can. And so that's basically how it started. Once we finally got it around there, it took us 3 weeks virtually to do the trip, because we were working only on Matthew Flinders' maps, because there'd been no national mapping done on through the Kimberley area or into that area. And but Flinders' shoreline descriptions were good enough that you could actually navigate by them. Yeah. And just using basic navigational tools, we took the boat around. And
by the way, I had old friend Ross Haldane sit in on Dale's interview with me.
So you had Flinders' maps and a book, and you hopped on board a pearling lugger.
Yep.
Talk about hopping on the pearling lugger, you know.
Well, we had
life aboard. What do you eat? What do you?
Oh, we had Thursday Island crew, of course, you know, and because the company had Curie Bay, which is their main pearling area, out of, where all the farms were out of Broome, and they used Torres Straits people as their staff, as their workers, and we had a plane that used to fly 20 or 30 of them over every year as labour for the Japanese technicians, because the Japanese technicians, they don't do a lot of work, they just do the technician stuff, and had the islanders doing all the work. So we were also taking a few Thursday Islanders around to the farm, and so we had with the lugger, we just had one big pot hanging off over a 44-gallon drum with a fire in it, and that just became the basics. We kept putting stuff into that, and that was just a basic stew as you were going along with the fire going and the whole thing, and you just have a meal out of that, and no refrigeration or anything like that. And then we'd catch fish and do that sort of stuff, eat fish, and just general stores, mainly lots of rice, because there's no refrigeration, and so you'd have 2 or 3 turtles on the side of the boat, just turned upside down on their backs, and that was keeping them alive. And then the islands would just come and just slice a flipper off and cook that up and and leave them alive, till they'd virtually eaten them all. So it wasn't a luxury trip. We stopped at a few islands looking at some historical stuff where people had found small cannonade and all that stuff on the islands through some of those areas, and we were looking to see if what we could find and any historical interest and so forth as we were going along. And it was a pearling lugger, so we had to watch the tides, because in some of those areas the lugger would do 6 to 7, 8 knots, or 6 knots, and the tide would be running at about 12. So we had to wait for the tide to change so we could move through the areas. We had to govern our travelling with the way the tide was running and how fast it was. Yeah. So, but it all survived. We got around there eventually, and we stopped in Darwin and spoke to Pass Bailey, old Mick Pass Bailey, and told him what we were doing, because they were big in they had a huge amount of Japanese finance, and they were still using Japanese divers and all that stuff, and they were interested in what we were doing, because part of our situation was not sponsored by the government, but forced on the government virtually, because we had to prove that we could stop the indentured labour and to keep the White Australia policy viable. And so that was a bit of government pressure we had at that stage. But so that was virtually how it started when we got to Thursday Island. And then after Thursday Island, then through to, we stopped at Darwin, and then continued our trip around to Broome. It took us 3 weeks virtually to get there. We all survived. Another friend of mine, Alan Badger, a very good diver, was working for Brian McKenna, shelling abs for him, and he approached me and said, "Is there any chance of getting a job with you guys when we go up to Broome?" And we're about to fish some state titles at Barwon Heads, and I said, "I'll have a chat to you down there, Al." And so that was fine. I put Alan on, which was the best thing ever happened, because he's a great diver and a very good organiser as well, and a personal friend. The only restriction was I had to let him go to fish for Australia in the world titles in Chile, and so because he was training every morning, and so I had to, when the titles were on, he had to go. I thought, that's fine. And I only employed some guys out of the top 10 in Australia, because to be in the top 10 you had to be capable of free diving to at least 100 foot, and Badger and the guys, they could do 140 and still work it. So I knew that if we had any equipment breakdown, a free ascent from that depth is no problem to them.
Yes, if something goes wrong, and say your air supply is cut off, you've often still got air in your lungs, and that is compressed air at the depth that you're at. Now, if you don't allow yourself to exhale as you ascend, you will burst all your lungs as that air expands, and that can be a fatal event.
We knew nothing about pearling at all. The book that I was reading at the time was Ian Idris's 40 Fathoms Deep, and that basically was our guide and Bible as to what happened, because we hadn't even seen virtually pearl shell underwater. So, and it was pretty rugged in Thursday Island, but that was okay. We set it all up together, and
So it must have been a pretty steep learning curve apart from abalone diving to pearl shell diving.
oh, completely different. The problem was with the pearling, the boats are moving all the time, and because the oysters aren't all together, they're not very sociable. There'd be one over there, one over there, one over there. They're basically a mud type oyster.
And one of the things I realised when I was diving was the search techniques on the bottom, and what you have to look for is a preferred lie of the shell. So how that comes about is all the shells have a similar aerodynamic shape, and during those extreme weather events, which are very frequent through that area, they'll be affected by the current and they'll all land in a particular angle. And so when you're searching for pearl shell, be aware of it and adjust your search technique so that you understand what the angle is and you get the best view to see the mantle and detect the pearl shell. So I found that really interesting, just combining different areas of knowledge.
And with the currents that we had to work in up there, we had a lot of trouble. We had to put that much weight on our bodies to get down that we couldn't move once we got down at the bottom. We couldn't, because we were free swimming divers. We couldn't do it. Whereas with a hard hat, they can virtually have two hard hat divers over, and the full weight of their equipment, so could virtually slow the boat down. Yeah? So they could just virtually move along. Yeah?
Lead boots and all.
Oh, boots, the whole, full suits, full hard hat suits, yeah. Constant volume suits, full suits. And so we ran into a few problems to start with, and it wasn't working out terribly well. But then we came across an idea. One of us had, someone had suggested it, we don't know, but it was dropping the anchor and pulling the anchor about a foot off the bottom and putting a lazy line on the anchor, then going down the anchor line, working back off the lazy line, which meant we were on the bottom and we could swim and move. And once we did that, we did it the first couple of times and it worked good. We came back in the Broome, brought up all the old batteries you could find and built bottom weights.
A 12-inch or 15-inch lump of bore casings. On the back of that weight, there was a piece of chain, eye of a chain welded, and you could clip your working line off that. And so by using a signal system, which I'll describe to you later on, you could raise or lower that shot weight so it was travelling just above the bottom, which in that area was just a very, very flat landscape or seascape.
And put the bottom, use them as bottom weights with lazy lines off, and then we go down the weight to the bottom, go on our lazy line. We could swim from side to side and side, which meant the boats could go faster because we're free swimming divers. We'd cover more ground, a lot more ground, and we could also work against the currents. We could turn around in a patch, come back the other way. Because
with the engine.
Yeah, just turn the engine, the boat around and come back and work against the tide, because we were free swimming divers and we had this bottom weight system.
So how did you tell the bloke up top that you wanted to turn around and go back?
Well, we had a series of car horn blasts, and we just give one blast for slow, two blasts for fasten, and three blasts for coming up or turn, or just a series of signals. That was all. Yeah.
We used to be able to signal to the surface from the bottom, go faster, go slower, lift the weights, drop the weights, through a signal system. And the signal system consisted of a magnet sealed up here in epoxy resin. And then on the other end and strapped to the hose was a reed switch. And connected to either end of the reed switch was a wire, so we have two wires that then ran into the air hose. Now when you closed the magnet, it closed the reed switch and allowed the current to flow through to a regulator up on deck, which then rang a car horn and gave you the signal.
A bag full of shell was a dead weight to pull up from any depth.
With our experience in abalone, what we did, we took abalone parachutes down.
Yeah.
So we could clip the parachute on and onto our shell basket, and we could just fill the basket up and put some air in it. Up it come, and we go up with it virtually. Yeah. Just a few innovations, but there was new innovations coming in all the time that we were working out on. We found that we could work 2 divers, which gave us a good scene. Then I worked 3 divers, another centre diver as well, and eventually we came in. We managed 4 divers eventually.
It's like conducting a human trawl.
One of the problems initially was that even at minimum engine revs in gear, the lugger was moving too fast for the divers.
Motoring up with the stern sail up, so you can steer the boat while it's really slow motoring, and we'd put a trailing sail over the back and we could adjust that to slow the boat down further when you're going along. Yeah.
A sail in the water? Or?
In the water, in the sail, it's on the water. Yeah, just a water sail. Yeah.
Yeah. Sea anchor almost.
Sea anchor, basically. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. By the time the first season had finished, we were only working 2 to 3 divers, and we were catching a big percentage of shell, and so the company considered there was a dead set success, the whole scene. We were going well because Alan Badger and I, when we were ashore, went around to the Japanese divers' quarters and spoke to the head diver. Originally they thought we were all a joke, but all of a sudden we were bringing it all together, and so they were sort of started to respect us a bit at that stage, and so we'd go around and try and talk to them. It was very hard to talk to them. They always welcome us, and and because we were working on decompression meters too, and we could hear them of a night time. They'd be still decompressing. You could hear the compressors going at night time.
Compressors going at night meant that there was one diver or more down in the depths decompressing after a bout of the bends, brought about due to inadequate staging, in other words, coming up too quick, in disregard or ignorance of the established dive tables.
And so they were getting bent pretty regularly.
And they'd be down through the night?
They'd be down through the night, yeah.
Decompressing?
Decompressing, yeah. And we took decompression meters around us, which they to the head diver, Tagata, and we gave him one which he would put on his shelf, and I think he thought that was going to stop him getting bent.
So you mentioned you spent 12 hours underwater, or what was the average time that you'd be actually on the bottom?
Well, that depends on the how much shell was there. See, we'd go along, and if we got a patch of shell, we'd go through that patch, and then come up to the surface, and then we'd steam back, and that would be our decompression time, coming back because we're out of the water, and then we start it again, and then you go again, and so and working with these meters, SOS meters, they'd build up the amount of time, and you'd have a look. And you'd either go into the red zone. If you're in the red, you'd stay up on board the boat until the meter went out of the red, and then you'd go back again. We never ate during the day at all, and at night time we just sit around on the deck and eat some rice and little fish that the crew would be catching over the sides. Yeah.
When spending all day in a wetsuit, inevitably the call of nature had to be answered.
That's a very warm feeling. and that is what happens. You pee in your wetsuit, and at the end of the day, when you take it off, you stink like the urinals at the footy.
Only allowed, just one tub of water, because we could only carry so much water on the boat.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We had a canvas shower there on the Winnie Jup, and we'd wash off and get ready for the next day.
One of the biggest things tonight, of course, was old pearl luggers. They're covered with cockroaches. They have cockroaches crawling over you during the night and all that sort of stuff. And the boat decks would leak, and there'd be water coming through the decks. It was pretty rugged. It wasn't a nice cruise. And we had to go, because the time we were spending underwater, we had to go up to thicker wetsuits, because it's getting freezing cold down there. Yeah. And that we hadn't realised at the start. We had lighter wetsuits, but then we had to end up in thicker wetsuits and so forth. We had all sorts of critters, and we had tiger sharks all the time. We could fish at night, and we'd put a little bit of turtle or something, because the island crew would be eating turtles, and we put a little bit of turtle on the line with a chain over, throw it over the side, and away they'd go, bang. You'd fight the thing, and it'd usually snap the chain. And then the next day, you'd have to dive, and you go over the side, and as you go down, there'd be two tiger sharks sitting this way with bits of chain hanging out the side of their mouths, just following the boat along. They never bothered us at that stage. But I wouldn't have liked to have been damaged if you were bleeding or anything, and they would have just cleaned you right up. But while everything was like that, it didn't seem to worry you at all.
Fright. You must have had a fright or two in your diving time.
Oh, quite a few frights. Yeah, I actually virtually died down there a couple of times, and I managed to, because equipment broke down, I managed to get in the air and try to get air to get up, and I wanted to break hoses, snap fittings, and managed to get some air out to suck it out, and managed to get yourself up to the surface. And it was so easy in some of those times that you're down there and you think, well, this is a bit hard. And then you think, well, you've just got to get out of here. You've just got to get out of here. So you have to talk to yourself and all that stuff, and then finally make an effort to do it. And usually, well, what has happened is once you start to get all this stuff together, you manage to get stuff untangled, you manage to get the air and things going, break fittings and all that shit, and get yourself up to the end. And then, that's all. Phew, that was fun. Yeah. So we had lots of equipment, but as far as predators, not a lot. But because we were, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to use competition spearfishermen, because they know what's down there.
I never came close to dying while I was pearling. I did while I was crow diving. But with the pearling, you'd go through in your own mind, because there was no occupational health and safety as we've got now. You go through your own mind about your own doom, how you might die, and then you think about what you'd have to do so that you didn't die. And you have to go through that in your mind so that if you have an incident happen, you don't have to think about it, you know what to do. And that's happened to me when we've run over an anchored buoy and your air hoses are all hooked around it and you're getting dragged off it. You've got to think, my God, what's happening? What am I going to do? So, yeah, you think about that.
I'd been working, and I was down on the bottom, hanging on my bottom line, going along, and that was fine. And then all of a sudden the boat started to speed up, and it went virtually almost on a full throttle. And I'm hanging on the bottom of the thing, and I'm down the bottom, down to about 80 feet, I suppose. And of course it's precious, incredible. I'm trying to keep my head so the mast didn't go, but I moved sideways, and bang, mast was gone. I'm just hanging on, the fins are coming off, and I just had to hang on there and try to get breathe. The air was sort of, I was still getting air, but it was very hard, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because there was no way I could go or do anything, and if I could let go, and I was gone. But the skipper, this is a problem working quite often with the indigenous skippers and so forth. They don't understand everything completely. And he didn't even realise I wasn't on board. So he's taken off. Eventually, someone woke up. and I only just managed to get back to the boat when they were stopped and pull me up. But I mean, the things, it's always small problems. Yes, they're very sheepish when you get back, when you manage to survive and get back.
History of Broome, and it's almost like a sort of colonial throwback with the indentured labour and the Japanese.
Well, it was, because they were all veranda pearlers in the old days. They were, and they were old English veranda pearlers. That's what they all were.
A veranda pearler was a term used to describe an absentee lugger owner, usually with a fleet of luggers, anything from 5, 10, 15 or more, bearing in mind that Broome in its heyday was home to a fleet of 400 luggers.
So when you guys rocked up as these blokes from Melbourne with your budgie smugglers,
they thought we were a great joke, because we were going to the one supermarket, which was Mail's store, and we were buying up all their pantyhose, exercise pantyhoses, to stop the chafes from the wetsuits and so forth. And they said, these strange people are going to buy pantyhose, and we're buying all this pantyhose, and we're buying all the filters we could get, all the women's filters, because you couldn't get activated charcoal to keep your air clean. You couldn't get that in Broome anywhere at that stage, and so we used to have to use Modess and all that stuff as filters, and so we'd be buying all this strange stuff, and they thought we were very strange people as divers.
So they thought you were strange.
Oh yeah.
What did you think about them? What was Broome like that in that?
Well, the whole thing, they thought we were just there as a joke, but also because they had tried, the government had pushed them to try to put other divers in, and they brought in English Navy divers. They brought 12 English Navy divers in, using Hookah, using tank and all that stuff, and eventually over the next almost a year they killed them all. They all died. And so they just weren't capable of doing it. And so they thought we'd go the same way as the others. But I had a different type of diver.
And you'll just continue on from that, you had a different type of diver.
Yeah. Because I was using competition spear fishermen who were in the top 10 in Australia, and they could all free dive to at least 100 foot without any problem. So free ascent from the bottom, which had killed a few of the other Navy divers. No problem with them, because they can free dive to 100 and 140 anyway. And also because they're competitive, really competitive.
We were paid in that year at 40 cents per shell, and the boat had a 60,000 shell quota. There were 4 divers, and all of us were after the biggest slice of the cake. It was piecework rates.
So it was full on?
Full on, yeah. Oh yeah, they are great athletes.
And because in Australian titles, or any specific titles, you can only take one fish of any one species, which means at least it's got a degree of difficulty, each fish. And so you've got to move different areas, have a look at different bottom structures to find out what different fish live in different areas, which was what we were going to have to do to look for fine shell. And so I thought the competition divers would be good as far as that goes, but also they're also competitive, and they work against each other. And it was individual catch basis that I'd put together. So they were working against each other all the time. It was real full-on competition every time you went diving. Yeah. We were fishing 2 types of shell. The main idea was shell for the culture farm, which is a certain size that can be operated on to grow pearls, and that's that's the limit of the size, and after that it becomes what's called commercial shell, which is just sold by the ton, and it's made in buttons. It was made into buttons in the early days, and a bit of stuff like that. Yeah. So that were the two. So there was people working on the deck, cleaning shell all the time, and chipping shell, and then there'd be a mothership somewhere anchored, or usually anchored around, and they'd have a runabout that had come over. A technician had come on board, and he'd take the shell for the farm. He'd check it, so it was okay, give you a docket how much shell, and then they'd take that off and put in their wet tanks to take back to the farm, back to Koory Bay. So it was a full sort of operation that way. Yeah, we worked virtually all the 80 Mile Beach from Broome back down, and that's it's a huge area, 80 Mile Beach, and we started off working shallower waters, but that soon petered out because once the shell's fished out, we'd have to move out deeper and deeper, and that was one of the problems that I knew was going to happen eventually. That we were going to have to get into deeper water and go into heavier decompression times and possible oxygen recompression and that type of thing that we weren't really geared to do all that. We didn't really have enough knowledge on that type of stuff at that stage anyway.
So Andy, what do you think of it all looking back?
Oh, that was making of me. I was blessed because of my involvement in swimming and sport, so I was able to compete effectively there. For the first time in my life, I had money. The respect that was being given to pearl divers in Broome was something I'd never experienced. That was lovely.
Well, it's interesting, and it was a lot of history. Yes. It's a lot of the situation that we changed by doing what we did, breaking those diving systems and being able to fish the shell, building the bottom systems, which is now used everywhere during the world. Everywhere in the world, any type of shell diving, fishing they use our bottom systems completely now, and so it's been. Apart from that, I feel just a little apprehensive with the fact that we managed to stop all their nice tourist situation. We finished off all the luggers don't work anymore. There's no luggers there anymore. This is all because of what we did, and we've changed the whole situation in pearl fishing completely, and it changed the whole industry because then whereas they could control it when they were using just so many Japanese divers. Now, as soon as our system came in, the divers that I had employed all wanted to make money themselves, so they were buying up all the leases themselves, and so all the colour in the whole scene had gone out of the whole industry. We'd certainly smashed all that, broken all that.
We work with a lot of Indigenous people, traditional owners from that area. My understanding now are Bardi. So we had Jimmy Hunter, who was the tender on the Winnijap, and David Wigan, who was the tender on the Cygnet Lass. David had actually been an old hard hat diver. But the thing I'd say about those fellows is unless you took the time with them and talked with them and got to understand, you'd remain in ignorance. So you might look at David Wigan, the late David Wigan, and think, oh, yeah, just a black fella. David was multilingual. He'd talk about 7 or 8 languages. He had a huge influence from the Kimberley across to Central Australia. You'd never know unless you took the time with these guys. And bear in mind, David and Jimmy Hunter, we put our lives in their hands as the tenders while we were on the bottom. So I have great respect for those guys.
Aboriginals are all castes. No one ever worked with us was a full-blood Aboriginal or anything. They're all caste people. A lot of them with TIs basically, and the two of the crew we brought around. That we brought around from Thursday Island. They stayed working with us for a long while, working on the boat. Became good friends and so forth.
And in the whole story of the pearling industry, one area that is grossly neglected is the contribution that the Torres Strait Islanders have made in the pearling industry, particularly in cultured pearl operations over the years. These guys were amazing. Just to see their agility across the cultivation rafts, and also their hardiness, to be admired. So in the end of all of this, where I ended up managing a pearling camp and not speaking in English, I had to learn to speak Creole. I got a great understanding of the structure of the pearling industry and the roles that the different races had played in it over the years.
I did 6 years there on that, and then that was the finish. I was having problems with skippers and stuff, and wanting to, whereas see, originally they were all under contract to me because it was my company, and I was working for Keith Duro, who was the main pearl master, the main man from Brown and Duro, and he's a very wealthy man, and he used to fly me around, and I used to come back and see him, get my contracts each year. He'd come back, tell me how many shell he wanted fished and all that stuff, and then I'd just separated. We put a new boat on each year virtually, and just to fish the contracts, depending how big the contract was. And then of course they all wanted to make more money, the guys that I'd employed originally, and so they were doing their own thing, and they were buying up leases, and they were going into the whole situation, and it was just getting too messy for me. It was just not and also they were going to have to work a lot deeper, and I'd been across during one of the layoffs back over to England when they were just opening up the North Shore to see what we could get, what advantages we could get by going into mixed gases and stuff and things, and what would be the best way to tackle this scene. So I went over and did all that and decided, come back now, forget it. It's too far out of my expertise, the whole thing. And so I said, well, that's it for me. I had contracts to do out of Thursday Island, so I came back. I said, I finished up.